Hello everyone! Today I will be featuring the Alaska, a much requested upcoming Tier 9 heavy American cruiser. Although battle cruiser would probably be more accurate, but since there's no such specific class in World of Warships, it gets firmly placed as just a cruiser in this game. The main selling point of this heavy cruiser is obviously the big 305mm guns that are almost becoming a new standard for new premiums in this game. The ship wields 9 of them, capable of lobbing them 19 kilometers away with a rather underwhelming but historically accurate reload of 20 seconds. The guns can be both amazing and frustrating. The slow reload means that even with the radar, if you don't land a big initial volley on a DD like here, you're going to struggle to do a lot of damage to it. This DD was kind enough to slow down to allow me to actually blap him, but most of the time a DD, if you miss your initial volley, a DD has like 20 seconds to disengage before your next volley shows up. I found expert reloader or expert loader to be practically mandatory on this ship, especially with the Captain John Doe that cuts down ammo switching time from 50% to 75%. 75% reduction, of course. It made managing ammo much more comfortable on this ship. I also obviously slotted a 12% better reload module to help alleviate the issue of having such a sluggish reload. So my reload in this vids is going to be 17.6 seconds because of this module. And the 27% fire chance that the ship has is quite nice, but once again, this slow reload greatly limits just how much of a fire starter it could be. The Dispersion, on the other hand, is significantly better than its direct competition, the Kronstadt. The Alaska gets access to Graf Spee Dispersion Ellipse, which is better than BBs, but worse than common cruisers. This naturally means that the guns are quite trolly, and RNG can frustrate you quite a bit, but every now and then you will get some extremely juicy and satisfying AP volleys. Mainly against cruisers though. The raw AP damage against BBs has overall been pretty underwhelming, to be honest, except when close enough to actually citadel them, or like if you're able to score nothing but pens. But scoring nothing but pens can also be quite challenging because the ship has a pretty annoying habit of scoring quite a lot of overpens. You can see the Otago gives broadside, I'm able to score some big hits, and of course because these guns are 305mm AP, the citadels do a lot of damage. So double citadel like that pretty much took half his health away. So that is a natural strength. One of the downsides is AP shell velocity, 762 meters per second. Which means that you practically need cruisers to sail in these nice direct lines without making too many evasive maneuvers. Ideally you want to be undetected, so you can actually land these volleys, because it's quite easy to dodge these shells if they so want to. I will be showing an example in just a bit. This guy though happily sails fairly straight. You don't notice that he's angled a fair bit, but I'm still able to score citadels. And that's of course because, like many of the other heavy American cruisers, it gets access to the improved USN AP angles. This means that you can score AP citadels at angles that would normally be impossible for many of the other ships in the game. As we can see, the Alsace tries to push kinda nose in, he is fairly angled. I'm just aiming for the side of his nose with this AP, and thanks to these improved angles I'm not getting bounces, but I'm instead getting solid pens, and because his nose isn't saturated yet, that means that he would need to angle more in order to mitigate the damage that I'm dealing. He's sitting quite stationary though, so at this point it's only a matter of time before our combined firepower will take him down. But, as I mentioned, the shell velocity can be annoying. Here we have an Ibuki, he's sub 11 kilometers, he's sailing in a perfectly straight line. I put my crosshair in front of him, I shoot, and he reacts to my muzzle flash, and he's even at 11 kilometers, he's easily able to angle his ship enough, so that the only thing I get is bounces, and as I mentioned, those overpens that the ship is quite prone to get. Luckily though, he decides to turn, when I get undetected, he decides to turn full broadside, which obviously against a ship like the Alaska is a very bad idea. The ship has a solid health pool of 60.8k, but not that much protecting that health. The torpedo build is extremely flimsy, sitting at a mere 13% damage reduction, meaning all torps will hit like a truck. And the armor just like on cruisers, is quite vulnerable, especially to battleships and HE spam. In fact, if we look at the bow, we can see 27mm, upper belt 28, and stern also 27. This means, of course, that anything large, anything 400mm and above, which pretty much is all high tier battleships, are going to be able to overmatch this armor. The deck armor is 36mm, which can bounce all of that AP. But you have a ton of superstructure. I mentioned this is a big ship, and you got the superstructure of a damn battleship right on top. So you're going to be eating a lot of HE hits and, of course, a lot of AP pens and all sorts of random garbage in this ship. It simply is not very tanky or very sustainable. It is worth noting, though, that the ship does have a 27mm bow, which compared to the Kronstadt's 25mm bow is actually a small advantage because it allows you to bounce 380mm guns. Now, the majority of the ships you face in high tier will have bigger guns than that, but if you do end up against Bismarcks, Tirpitz, Alsace, possibly the upcoming Jean Bart, if you end up against these ships, then having this improved bow is quite nice, since you'll be able to just go nose in and there's not really too much they can do about it. Now, the Citadel actually sits extremely low in the water. This is worth noting. The Citadel sits extremely low, far below the waterline, in fact. Now, at first glance, you'd think, well, this ship is going to be impossible to Citadel. But that's not actually the case at all. Full broadside, I've been easily Citadeled, especially at range. Close range, it becomes harder to Citadel, but this nice broadside does tend to arm a lot of that AP coming your way, so you'll be eating a lot of pens either way. Ultimately, though, the Citadel is especially vulnerable when shot at through the stern or through the bow, and the reason for this is, well, as I mentioned, battleships tend to overmatch all your armor, but more importantly, the Citadel armor all around it is very thin. In fact, it's capable of also being overmatched by everything. So if a battleship shell as much as skims over this Citadel armor, because of the way the mechanics in this game work, that's going to mean it's going to automatically overmatch the armor, and yeah, and it's going to be a Citadel. I can actually bring up an example here, because this brings up another frustrating issue with this ship, and that is the firing angles. They are absolutely awful. As you can see here, I'm trying to come around the corner, I'm trying to like shoot this rune, I'm trying to punish these players, and I'm forced to give so much broadside just to be able to use my front guns. And it's only, of course, a matter of time before the Yamato decides, well, I'm gonna shoot that guy, he overmatches my armor, and the one hit he scores is an instant Citadel straight through the stern. And he's not really that far away either, he's quite close to me. So obviously any dreams of this low water Citadel making you completely immune to Citadel, well, you should discard to those. This also brings up the maneuverability of the ship, which, well, even with the rudder shift module slotted, we can only bring down the rudder shift to 11 seconds. Now that's not bad for a battleship, but on a cruiser it's pretty terrible, especially as the awkward firing angles force you to rely so heavily on this rudder shift. Well, because you want to be turning in to shoot and turning away to dodge and so forth, because you can't just sail in a straight line away because of the terrible firing angles. The speed is a solid 33 knots. And the turning circle of 850 meters isn't really that bad. It's not that good either, but it's not that bad. Overall, though, the ship feels a lot clumsier than it actually is, because the firing angles are so cumbersome. This feeling gets exacerbated by the incredibly slow turret traverse for cruiser standards. Even with John Doe, this special captain, even with his improved expert marksman, my ship sits at a 33.6 second rudder shift. Turret traverse. In comparison, the Missouri with Admiral Halsey sits at a 36 second turret traverse. They both have the improved turret traverse perk. So you almost have battleship turret traverse. This is of course with the module, but still, it's a pretty damn significant downside for a cruiser to have. The AA on the ship is unsurprisingly quite good. Able to reach a solid 7.2 kilometers with the full AA range. Although personally I ended up going for the main gun dispersion module instead of the AA range, as the slow reload made me prioritize getting as much as possible out of the guns. Still though, even with just AFT, you boost your range to 6 kilometers on the main aura and 4.2 on the secondary aura, or the mid-range aura. And you do a decent job of defending yourself and your teammates. Of course, in this case, that was a tier 7 carrier, so I kind of shredded his planes. Higher tier carriers are obviously going to be an issue, but then again, those carriers are an issue to everyone who's not extremely specialized in dealing with planes. You do a decent job with the anti-air though. It's basically a slightly boosted Baltimore AA. Of course, with the carrier rework coming up, this might not be as big of an issue, or this might change. That's very hard to say since we don't really know when it's coming, so I thought it was worth mentioning anyway. Finally, of course, we have one of the most important values on a cruiser, and that is the concealment. And it's honestly not really that impressive. It has a 12.4 km ground spotting, or well, sea spotting concealment, and that's with the full concealment build, of course. And that's not very impressive. The Missouri has 12.2 kilometers, and the other T9 cruisers outspot you. Either Kronstadt matches your concealment, Donsko has 12.3, and then pretty much everyone else has a better concealment. The 9.6 km plane spotting means that you're very easy to spot from the air. That's of course the massive superstructure, no doubt playing a part. And the fact that you have such big guns, aka 305mm guns, means that the smoke firing penalty is an extremely harsh 12.8 kilometers. So you won't really be able to utilize smokes very well to your advantage either. So my closing thoughts on this ship? Well, the reason this Alaska commentary took me so long was because I was very undecided about this ship. I still am a bit undecided. It's certainly not a bad ship. Compared to many of the stinkers at tier 9, it's very strong, don't get me wrong. It's just that it's not very fun to play in my book. The sluggish turret traverse, the slow shell velocity, the awful firing arcs, it just feels so cumbersome to play. Landing those big AP volleys when someone like underestimates you and pops around the corner is very enjoyable. But then again, having to whittle down an angled ship with the pitiful DPM can be equally frustrating. Playing the ship as a kiter is also frustrating because of those awkward firing angles and that awful, well, not awful, but questionable rudder shift. And trying to park nose in can be just as annoying because, well, battleships overmatch you and cruisers can just HE spam you. And DDs outspot you easily because of the concealment. So, once again, I don't think this is a bad ship. I do not think the Alaska is a bad ship. I just don't think it's a very fun ship to play. Well, that was my impressions. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will talk to you guys later.